Good evening. Call this Fitchburg City Council as a whole Budget Committee meeting, Tuesday, May 28, 2013, to order. First item on the agenda is the Fire Department, page 29 in your packet. The total mayor's budget for FY14, $5,898,340. The projected for the current year is $5,833,490, and the amount requested was $6,285,139. Councilor DiNatale.
Thank you. Chief, am I to understand that there are 4 positions in your budget that are going to be unfilled?
That's correct.
Through retirements?
That's correct.
And when are those retirements taking place?
2 of them already have taken place. I suspect the other 2 will be, one could be as early as the end of June, but I suspect they'll both be sometime in July. One of them may be a bit later. It's up to PERAC now. It's a retirement that's going through the state retirement system.
And I understand we have grants with the federal government for the hiring of new firefighters to replace retiring ones. What does this do to our grant agreement with the federal government by not filling these 4 positions? Is there a minimum staffing requirement we're supposed to keep up for these grants to remain valid?
There is. When we applied for the grant, we were at a number of firefighters, and whatever that grant appropriation brings us to at a new number, we're obligated till the end of the grant to stay at that number within a reasonable amount of time.
So, how did this decision come before your department? I know this probably is a question for the mayor. I mean, knowing that we are going to get penalized from the feds if we don't fund these positions at the staffing levels that the grants the mayor signed is requiring, the only thing I can think of is the mayor is banking on a supplemental funding source somewhere down the road that may or may not come to cover us for that. But let's say the supplemental budget came a couple of months down the road from now. When the budget goes into effect on July 1st, when is the federal government going to get notified, or when will they find out that we are not in compliance with the grant, even if we're going to fund those positions, hypothetically, 3 months down the road or 5 months down the road? I mean, is there a date where the feds are going to look at us and say, hey, you're not meeting the requirement? And the other point is that, you know, I know you're before us, but I don't consider this your budget. I'm sorry. I mean, I know your stance in this city. I know you probably can't like what you see on this page, but I guess the question is for the mayor. I mean, knowing that we have minimum staffing levels that we have to maintain to have these grants valid, what was the methodology behind cutting the 160 for these 4 positions, putting this city in jeopardy of having to pay back? How much would we have to pay back to the feds if this were to stay in effect?
Potentially, if they audit everything back, would be $424,000.
So we cut 160 to potentially almost triple what we owe back to the feds. There's got to be some magic funding source that you're planning on getting, because I don't understand the logic behind that cut, unless there is a guarantee that we're going to get that money somewhere. I don't understand the funding. I don't understand the logic. We're cutting 160, and we might have to owe the feds 420.
Council, I can...
Why were they cut?
I can answer the questions as best of my ability, Councilor, and some of it's for the mayor, but when a budget session started, the question came up as always, you know, it was a tough budget, and have you got some retirements coming up? And we did. We had 2 that we knew of, and 2 that we were hoping would get done by July 1st. In the past, we have waited for supplemental budget on overtime requests, and certainly, to answer one of your questions, we will report again the first week in July to the feds what our number of people are, and they do follow up with phone calls. There is some leeway. I think at the time, the mayor asked me if we could delay this a little bit, and obviously, the federal government knows there's constraints, but we can't ignore the grant, and we can't ignore fulfilling our obligation to the grant. In my opinion, these grants have been great for us. We've gotten over $1.7 million in grants for staffing alone, and the only obligation is that you maintain the staffing that brings you to during the term of the grant. There's no co-pay by the city. I think when we started these grants 5 years ago or 4 years ago, you had to wait a year after the grant, and you still had to comply with the grant. That stipulation's gone away. And even with all these grants, you can see from the staffing charts that we'll put the budget this year, we're still over 14 positions short than we were 6 years ago.
So piggybacking off of that, my concern going forward, if this stays, this kind of sends an indirect message to me, in that the mayor's proposal, in a way, is saying to me, and this is how I interpret it, that if we can't afford 4 new hires at a significantly less cost than the 4 that are retiring through a grant, how can we afford the guys we have on staff now who were on those grants, that once those grants run out, we have to pick them up fully? That's the concern I had when I saw this budget, is if we can't afford 4 new guys right now that are far less expensive than the ones retiring, how are we going to afford the other firefighters that are on grants right now when those run out? This is a concern I have, because the biggest reason why we all voted for these grants is because the union made concessions, starting salaries went down, you have a guy making with overtime a lot of money, and then they retire, and the new guy comes in at a base salary that's far less, and we can sustain them because they're a lot less expensive than the people that are leaving. If we can't afford them now, when the grants are still active, how are we going to afford them when all these grants go away? That's the biggest concern I took from this. And this scares me, because, I mean, if we can't sustain them now, how are we going to sustain them later?
I can tell you, Counsel, that we've had 16 grant positions approved that we have sustained. These are the last 4. However, I mean, obviously, we've been working in the right direction, building back slowly to get to the minimum number of people we need. And obviously, I want to see the 4 positions restored. The mayor's worked on all these reductions and things, and obviously, I'd like to find a way to restore this, obviously.
Well, I have been doing my best to find cuts in the proposal and do what the mayor chose not to do, and that's keep the 4 positions and the 2 police officers. And I think we've all done a good job so far of putting things on the table. I do have 2 cuts I'm recommending, and I want it to be clear. I understand you are very stretched thin, and I want you to understand that I am not making these cuts because I disagree with what you have put forth. Again, these are cuts in response to what the mayor is approving, because I believe there can be some reallocation with these cuts, staying within your budget to restore at least 1 position. Okay? I did it with the police. Actually, I proposed cutting $100,000 from the police, with the hope that that $100,000 stays there and funds the 2 officers that aren't being filled. What I'm going to propose here would fund 1 firefighter, and I'm hoping the money that we cut from elsewhere will fund the 3 others, because there's no reason those 4 positions should have been cut, especially when we're going to get penalized potentially triple what we're paying now. I still don't get the logic of that. Maybe I'll hear it later, but I'd be interested to put on the list $35,000 for holidays and $5,000 for household, with the stipulation that it stays within the fire department, with the same stipulation I had last week with the police. That's purely, for me, budget reallocation. That has nothing to do with management of funds or anything. Anything we can do to keep that staffing level, because no matter what your opinion is of the staffing levels, we have a grant that's going to heavily penalize us if we don't restore these cuts. And I don't understand for the life of me why they were cut to begin with. I don't get it. Makes no sense to me. Thank you.
Councilor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, you said that when the grants were applied for, there was a certain number.
Yes.
Could you tell me what that number was?
74 uniform firefighters.
74 uniforms. And in this budget, how many uniforms are in this?
74. But when the grant was applied for at 74, the grant gave us 4 more. That brought us to 78.
So the 78 was the number.
That's correct.
And now we're at 74.
This budget's at 74.
Okay. And second question is, what's the minimum number of personnel per shift that you think is appropriate for the safety of the residents and for the safety of the fire personnel?
I think I've been pretty clear over the years, Counselor, that 15 is the absolute minimum, and in that 15 is a 3rd person on the ladder truck, which I know the mayor's very aware of. We are at 14 currently on the...
You didn't let me do the follow-up. Yeah. That's okay. So it's 15 and 14 currently?
Correct, and that's why these 4 is 1 position each shift that's going to take a...
Would bring us back to the 15, which is the minimum that
we were starting to get back to having 15 quite a bit with the staffing and the overtime. We were doing pretty good, and this takes us backwards a little bit.
Thank you.
Chief, I just had a couple questions on a couple of the line items. On higher classification,
Yep.
looked like in 2012 you went high in it. Do you see that as a realistic number in that? for this year? I mean, what happened in prior years to see that?
I do, it all depends on sick leave and injury.
Okay.
This year, once again, we've had, it's one of the retirements pending. There's a lieutenant, and that takes up quite a bit of that. Also, it depends on the FEMA director and the Deputy Bellevue, if they have to get off to attend meetings for FEMA or for internet technology, I have to give them time, or we have to cover them and move somebody up. So, you never know about that. There's been years we've been low, and there's years we've been high, so
Same with sick time buyback, what do you expect this year? I mean, is that
sick time
a realistic
buyback,
number, or is
it'll
that-
depend if we get these other two people off the books by July 1st. If not, that would probably cover maybe 2 or 3, depending how much sick time someone has the books when they retire. But I don't see after those 2 retirements, many more retirements in the next year. I think it may drop off for a year or so. But again, we've had people that retired suddenly and with no warning, so.
And your overtime,
The overtime's still a little bit low, but, and it's certainly if we don't get the positions filled.
right, I mean,
that
if you're
won't make
talking about keeping just staying at 14,
Yeah, that won't make it.
overtime.
If the positions go unfilled, that'll be, to keep the staffing we've got now, the 14 on duty would be difficult. It would be impossible.
Thank you, Chief. Will there be equipment coming out of service or not?
Potentially, that's the next step. We're down to 3 engines and a ladder and the ambulance, so we've removed a couple of trucks over the last few years, and we're pretty much down to...
I just wanted to, I guess, ask you more about the question about, you alluded to there being leeway, and I guess I'm just not clear about, have we extended that leeway with the grant requirements? And if not, have we tried to talk to our congressional delegation about seeing if there's something that can happen to allow us more leeway in hiring the 4 police officers?
Yeah,
I mean, firefighters, sorry, firefighters.
The grant is pretty strict in its regulations. I mean, we've had that, and it's in the grant for a good reason, that the federal government doesn't give you money so you can just get rid of people and they pay the bill. I mean, I think it's like you folks with CDBG to agencies and say, we've been giving you this $50,000, not to supplement and supplant money. The grant has changed over the years, and to me, I mean, it's a pretty good grant. These grants are no payment by the city. They pay all benefits, they pay all salaries, and they do it for 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, you either pick it up or you don't at the end of the time. So my question, when the mayor asked me the question about is there some leeway, is there some time here, I asked that question to our liaison. He said yes, but it's obviously not forever. You can't say we're eliminating these jobs and not filling them. But our official notification that we've lost 2 positions won't be made on our grant applications, which we have to do quarterly reports until the first week in July.
Not seeing the mayor's hand go up, I guess I'll ask as a council that we get a request to the mayor for the next meeting as to how she plans on dealing with this.
I can say that now, so.
Okay.
So this is something that I knew about when this draft budget was submitted to the council about 6.5, 7 weeks ago. So by July 1st, we're hoping to have either one of 2 scenarios. One is that the funding for not only this, but also to hear what your other priorities are. I want to make sure that we don't just say, let's comply with the federal grant and let's not even think about what the city wants or needs, right? I think there should be a greater conversation. But it's either going to be funded by prospective cuts that were either ideas that I was waiting to hear prior to May 15th, which I didn't hear any, or prospective cuts that are being slated now that would be part of a supplemental budget in addition to other items that you might be thinking about. And if there are none, because that might be the scenario. I haven't heard from the council as a whole. This is your prerogative to discuss. You might say, we want absolutely no cuts. If you say absolutely no cuts, then our next step would be to look at utilizing free cash or for me to make that executive decision. So right now, there are multiple possibilities on the table. One is that the council could propose cuts, and from those cuts, a supplemental budget would be made, not just for this, but for other things. The second option is that, let's say, should the council not choose to make cuts, or make cuts in less than the amount, I can make some executive decisions and then provide a supplemental budget. And the third option is if neither of those two things happen within this budget, then the third option would be for me to express in that report that is due that I would look at utilizing certified free cash to that respect. So there are three ways to fund this. And this just, again, gives the options. If there's things the counselors want to see deleted, then that is within your prerogative. But I've said this every year, and I'll say this again. If there's any line items that you want to see increased, please let me know, and I will always consider those.
I guess I'm speaking on behalf of the council. I mean, this is the third time we've heard the little spiel because it keeps getting thrown in our face. The budget process usually starts when the council receives the budget and we come in here and we start talking and deliberating your budget, okay? And to say we've had input, yes, we've had time to input. We chose not to. We chose to go through the deliberations, look at the budget that's submitted, come up with recommendations or no recommendations, and then the budget goes at the end of the budget sessions. Okay, so to keep telling us we had time to do that, we all acknowledge that. You don't have to tell us again. Okay, we acknowledge the fact that you gave us time to do it. We chose to do it during the budget sessions, and that's what we're doing now. Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you, Mr. President. I couldn't agree more with what you just said, and I'm very happy you said it. If we do this through a supplemental budget, my concern is, we've done supplemental budgets before, and usually it's when the state gives us a one-time kiss that we don't know if we're going to get next year. So I'm nervous about doing it this way. This is a risk we're taking on. And with all the problems we've been talking about for the last few weeks, I don't know why anyone in this room would want to vote one-time funds to pay for recurring expenses. Because are we going to go through this next year? We're going to go through it the year after that.
Thank you, Councilor Di Natale. It's just like we've heard that speech, we've heard that speech.
I know, I'm just saying, the option the mayor said to us tonight that I've heard for the first time is through a supplemental budget. I don't know how that's going to help the chief and his staffing issues when that's one time. It's not going to fix the problem.
Councilor Hay.
Thank you. The mayor just spoke of three options that are available regarding the positions that are cut out of the fire department budget here. And I found it interesting that one of them was for this body to take action and make some cuts, and the mayor would then put that money back into that line item. The other two options were options where the mayor accepted the responsibility and made the choices and took the action. I certainly want these positions back here, and if this body needs to, I think we should make cuts and tell her where we think it's appropriate. But at the beginning of this process, I said that there was one consideration was just to pass it as is, and then the mayor would have had to have dealt with it. And that's what the mayor just acknowledged to us, that if this body takes no action, then she would have to do that. There were three options. Two were her power and prerogative, and the third was to give it to this body and hope that this body would make those cuts. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Chief.
Councilors, if I just could, I agree with all the conversation here tonight, but I think sometimes these grants were great, and sometimes they're not, because we've still lost 23 positions over the last 10 years in our department, so we haven't even kept up with the retirements anywhere close. And when you're talking about emergency services, it all comes down, I think the world saw what happened down at the marathon, that you got to have the right number of people with the right equipment and the right training in the right place within a timely fashion, and that's what we try to do here. And that's our ultimate goal, and I just think, as the mayor said, instead of looking at it as a grant, we should be looking at the number of staffing, which some of the councils have brought up also, that what's our real minimum? I can tell you we're below our real minimum. So I'd just like the councils to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Moving on to page 42. Thank you, Chief. Board of Health Inspectional Services. I don't know, I guess we'll start off with Board of Health Inspectional Services, page 42. Mayor's budget, $413,734. Projected for this current fiscal year is $399,167, and the requested was $499,093. Questions? Councilor Di Natale.
Recommendations that I will send to the auditor. $1,000 out of overtime, $1,000 out of higher classification, $3,000 out of advertising, $4,000 out of automobile, and $33,500 out of repair and care, and $2,000 out of miscellaneous expenses and repairs. Please. Thank you.
Mr. Curry?
Over that again?
$1,000 out of overtime, $1,000 out of higher classification, $3,000 out of advertising, $4,000 out of automobile, $33,500 out of repair and care under building care and maintenance, City Hall, and $2,000 out of miscellaneous expenses and repairs. That covers the other page 44. I'm just getting ahead of myself, so I don't have to repeat it, but
Councilor Hay.
sorry.
Thank you. Hi, Steve. Hi, Duffy. Increases in the personal services, all of that is negotiated?
Correct. Union contracts.
And the second question is, through the inspections that we're doing with the building department in particular, are we generating more revenue?
Yes, we are generating more revenue. The building department has done a terrific job with chasing enforcement on those individuals that don't pull a building permit, as well as issuing fines. The building department has been collecting between $10,000 and $15,000 a year fines, and that's just generated from on an annual basis through CDBG.
Where is that in this budget?
The CDBG employee is a local building inspector. He is also a part-time facilities coordinator.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I may comment on that, our facilities coordinator took a big part in coordinating our move from City Hall. So he has very close experience with the repair and care accounts.
Thank you.
Councilor Tran.
So, Director Curry, can you speak on the reason why there's such a huge discrepancy between your requested amount and the mayor's amount pertaining to the automobile line item?
Can I?
Absolutely.
I requested money to buy 3 new vehicles for inspectors. I asked for $100,000. The vehicles that we're driving, that our inspectors are driving, are ones, once the police department feels they're too dangerous for their employees to drive, we get them. If we take $4,000 out of the automobile budget, one way to do that is to reduce the number of vehicles we have and have someone walking. What we've spent this year in automobile budget, we've been fairly careful not to spend money on vehicles. We were hoping to get some more vehicles that the police thought were unfit for their use so that we could get rid of some of ours. But in the last week, we've had 4 of our vehicles having repairs done. One of them, the personnel felt was too dangerous for them to drive, so it's getting fixed. 2 of them would not meet state minimum requirements to get inspection stickers. They now will be able to get stickers for the first time in a couple of years. and another one, just routine maintenance to try to keep it running. And I understand the budget's tight, but we have people driving vehicles that the police department says are too dangerous to drive, so we have them.
What's the newest vehicle you have, 2001?
The Taurus that we just got is I'm not sure what age it is, but it's several years old.
So, a couple of the vehicles are 96s.
Can you,
I mean, it's touch and go as far as the budget goes. I mean, with a 96, if we could have a $5,000 repair tomorrow, or no problems.
I'm trying to digest what you just said to me, that we have employees driving around with vehicles that have been deemed too dangerous to be occupied in. Can you define or elaborate what the police department deemed to be quote-unquote too dangerous?
Because they're involved with more aggressive driving than we are, they felt that the vehicles were not safe for their type of driving. There were front ends that need parts replaced, drivetrains, those types of parts, which we try carefully, I don't want to put a couple $1,000s into a car and then have it towed to Aldrich's, and so we've been reluctant to spend money, hoping that someday there'll be a light at the end of the tunnel. We'll get some newer vehicles or something else, but that's not going to happen right now. So we've fixed, because I won't spend the money early in the year. It's now when we're in the end of May. We're making these vehicles. As I said, a couple of them didn't have inspection stickers for a couple of years. We've actually gone through a color cycle in inspection stickers that we were at the right color, but the wrong years on them. We've gotten those vehicles now to have current inspection stickers. They do meet the state highway standards, the registry standards right now, today, so that they're all safe. But for a while, we weren't. We were given things that didn't pass. We've made them. With that $14,000, we've been able to get them up to a standard that...
It raises a concern to me. In the past and up to this point, by not having adequate vehicles to travel from point A to point B, have our inspectors been prevented from performing their duties, and in turn preventing growth to the city, because a lot of developers, builders, homeowners depend on your services to get their projects inspected.
I've never used a city vehicle. I always use my own, and I go wherever I need to do it. We've had times when inspectors are riding as a pair in a vehicle, so they will coordinate their schedules so that they can get their inspections done. We have never, to the best of my knowledge, not gotten inspections done in a timely fashion. We will, there's an extra vehicle that we share with the health department that we'll take when, in a pinch.
Which incidentally doesn't pass inspection either.
Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your department's hard work. And this is an issue that we, as a council, need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you.
For being.
Duffy, you mentioned that you don't use a city vehicle, you use your own vehicle?
I use my own.
Are you reimbursed by mileage, or?
I am. When I was hired 3 years ago, I was told there wasn't a city vehicle, and I could use my own vehicle and be reimbursed. And I've chosen to always drive my own vehicle.
Right. Do the inspectors have that choice too, or no?
They have that choice, but they're paid by their union agreement. They get so much a week instead of so much a mile.
Okay.
And the inspectors have said that if they're driving their own personal vehicles, they will not come in on overtime. And I don't know whether we can negotiate that or whether they could block at that or not, but they've said that they would choose not to come in.
So you have yourself and 3 inspectors under your domain,
I have myself and 4 inspectors.
4 inspectors. And those 4 inspectors each had a car, or each have a car?
The electrical, the plumbing, and the full-time building inspector have vehicles that they take home because they come in whenever there's calls for it. John is a part-time inspector. He has a city vehicle. It's parked here on city property, doesn't go home or anything, and I take my own wherever I go.
Okay. And then through the Board of Health, how many cars do you have?
Board of Health has 1 car. We use, as he stated, we use a truck for the moving of barrels whenever that's necessary.
And your inspectors and that, do they use your own vehicles then?
My inspectors use their own vehicles, yes.
Okay. Again, maybe for the mayor, maybe in future negotiations, look at having all people use their own vehicles instead of city vehicles and relieve yourself of that?
I mean, we've looked at it in current negotiations and we're unsuccessful, so we'll continue to look at that.
And then maybe a city carpool. I have, because I know there are some vehicles in the police and fire department not related to the cruisers or the people out on the street all the time, whether it's, maybe there's a way to make better use of the vehicles we all have here and do like the federal government does, a carpool area where you sign out a car. It's tough times require different thinking outside the box, and buying cars is not a cheap thing, and then maintaining them is not a cheap thing. So, I think we have to start looking outside the box.
One of the things, any options I would be happy to explore. The plumbing inspector also does a lot of plumbing for the city. He carries all of his tools in the vehicle, as does the electrical inspector. For them to grab a car to go wherever, to then have to...
Makes sense. I'm thinking more of the day-to-day inspections, whether it's nurses going out or inspectors going out, fire prevention going, those type of services where maybe there could be a shared service or change in the policy where you use your own vehicle and it's part of a hiring requirement. I don't know, but cars can get expensive and maintaining them can get very expensive.
I think that we'd have to be very... I know personally I carry a lot of extra personal liability on my vehicle because of my concerns, and I think that the city would want to look at all the costs, not just...
Right, and I'm saying do it fairly for the employees so that, yes, they get a payment, a stipend of some sort that covers not only the gas and, it covers their cost and the cost of the extra insurance, obviously. But I'm sure it's much cheaper than us buying these cars.
Another option would be we have some of the lowest permit prices anywhere, to raise our permit fees, but to keep the funds within the department, because by state law, we can use those funds for costs. If we were to buy vehicles, we're using vehicles that are 96s, that's it. If we were to buy a vehicle and get that much, not get a vehicle that has been used by a police service or whatever in a much harder fashion, have a vehicle that, I would anticipate that the way of inspectors' vehicles used, it should certainly go 12 or 15 years, and for that money to be used, we've turned in $260-some-odd thousand this year from permit fees, having the lowest fees around.
I'd be interested in seeing either some kind of a scale or a chart that shows our fees versus other cities and see if there is some opportunity to make some changes or not. So I think, again, as we're looking at not only expenses, looking at revenue stream, that'd be an important thing to look at. So if you had something to present, I think it'd be interesting to see that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. I think it's probably best that we get an inventory of all the city vehicles that we have right now, as we did a long time ago, I believe. And I can't imagine the faces of the public watching this when they hear people say that we're driving cars that wouldn't pass inspection, or we're not driving cars that wouldn't pass inspection. We should probably get this every year, see how many cars we have in the fleet everywhere, the years, the makes, the models, are they inspection certified, are they non-inspection certified, basically an inventory. My memory doesn't serve me very well, but I don't even know, are these cars on the Capital Improvement Commission's list, or are they not on the list for future consideration? They are? How many cars 3 cars or 4 that your department utilizes?
We use 4 cars, well, 2 cars, 2 SUVs, and then the bucket truck that is used for traffic signals.
And of those 5 vehicles, how many need to be replaced now?
Only 5.
So, I mean, it's a decision we're going to have to make down the road and policy-wise, is do we compensate an employee for using their own car via stipend or mileage reimbursement and cover the insurance, or do we take on the responsibility of having to replace these fleets every so many years beyond the life expectancy? This is the kind of thing that we should be using STABE on, or free cash on, not recurring expenses. We should be using this money to buy vehicles if that is what we have to do, and not have the employees drive. My only other question is, per the contracts, if an employee uses a city vehicle, they're getting a stipend for using, did I hear that right earlier, or, no?
They get 55 a week for their
They get
own vehicle?
$55 per week.
For their vehicle?
Correct.
Flat rate.
I thought it was to use our, okay.
No.
Okay.
They get $55 a week to use their vehicle, and the 3 that take their vehicles home have told me that they will not come in on callbacks if they're bringing their own vehicles.
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
I mean, this is another one of those things where we're told this, and to me, it's a little embarrassing, but I don't know what we're going to do about it going forward. I mean, it sounds like it's something that's pressing, that we have cars that can't even hit the road because they don't pass inspection. So, I'd like to know what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks about this, and what other vehicles are like this that we have.
As I said, the daily drivers, we got the 4 of them so that they can all pass inspection since the 1st of May. How long they will last is someone with greater knowledge than I.
Well, we have almost $5 million in stabilization, and those are capital needs, so I know there's a big list, but that's what we should use it for. Thank you.
Councilor Caddy.
What's the breakdown of the 14,000 in automobiles? Does that include your gas?
That's our budget for the year, gas and repairs.
Any idea how much the gas is?
I have not broken that out.
All right. How many miles do you think those vehicles are used in a week?
I have not asked them to, I don't know what they use for mileage. I do the least traveling for inspections because I do more administrative, but it's not unusual for me to put 40 or 50 miles a week on my vehicle, just part-time. I know they're putting more than that.
Well, the reason I'm asking is you have always been given, the old police vehicles, and typically when they give them away, they have very high mileage. So you're starting out with a vehicle with high mileage and pretty much been beat up a little bit, but if you're putting very low miles on a car, and I think you said earlier that if you bought a new one, it would last you 12 to 15 years.
I would anticipate it should.
Because you're starting with a vehicle with no miles on it. And it's not being driven like a police cruiser for the first few years of its life. So my point would be, why couldn't the city go out for a bond to buy 4 vehicles? We did it before with the police cruisers. It doesn't work out so well because the police cruisers only last a year to 2 years. But under this situation, I do believe they would probably last 10 to 12 years. So what would be wrong with going out for a bond for the vehicles, and then only a portion of that money comes out of his budget for the next 10 years? And probably in the end, what you're going to obtain is you're going to have safer vehicles for these people to operate, and probably you'd be paying for them because they're spread out over that amount of time. You'd probably stay right within your budget of the 14,000, and assuming instead of driving a great big old cruiser, you're going to be driving something that's more economical on gas.
I would hope so.
But I would think with a little bit of work, if you ran the figures, you could probably get those figures very, very close. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Hay?
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Di Natale mentioned stabilization, Councilor Caddy mentioned bonding. I would not be opposed to either one of those avenues to try to do something with our vehicles. But when and if we get a clear picture of what it is we have, who uses it, and how we're going to do it. 6 or 8 years ago, we tried to tackle this and tried to get a clear picture and a number and decide whether we're going to have a carpool, as Councilor Bean had indicated, that people would share the cars, and people complained about that. And then we talked about people using their own cars, and some people complained about that. And then we talked about having all city cars, and some people complained about that. I think we need to come up with a policy, a program that we can implement before we decide to go out and spend money on either bonding or taking money out of stabilization. Not opposed to either of those things, but I'd like to have something clear and definitive. I mean, we've had these gentlemen sit here tonight and tell us that people in their staff get paid 2 different ways. Some people get paid per mile and some people get paid per week. Well, you know, can't we, like, make it uniformed? Can't we make a decision that we think is in the best interest of the city and say this is the way it's going to be? And everybody's going to be the same across the board? As long as you have this mishmash out there, and this one doing that, and this one doing that, and this one doing that, it's hard to tackle, it's hard to be definitive, and it's hard for me as a city councilor to determine that I'm willing to spend money. It's not this body's job as part of this budget process, but I think it's the city's responsibility in the future, and in the near future, hopefully, to tackle this issue and come up with something that says definitively, this is how we're going to do it, this is a 10-year plan, and when we do that, I'll be glad to consider stabilization or bonding. Because as Councilor Caddy said, bonding police cars, they're gone in 2 years. You're bonding cars for, you know, the building inspectors, and they last 12 or 15, well, the bond's paid off in 4 years, and you get another 9 or 10 years using the car. Makes some sense, but we need to get a handle on this and get it straightened before we do anything. Thank you.
I guess my question was around the requested amount of $100,000 versus the $14,000 for new vehicles. The $14,000 is, so there's 2 questions. One is, for the $14,000, it's enough for gas and repairs for the year?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so that means there's $86,000. Those were for how many cars that you requested?
I think we proposed to split it up over 2 years with that figure.
I was hoping that with the 86,000, I could get at least 3 vehicles.
3 vehicles. So we're looking at over $20,000 for each vehicle. Is that
That's
the running?
I don't have an exact price. I'm thinking that the plumbing and electrical inspector, because they're carrying equipment, is going to need more something, an SUV or a four-wheel drive pickup or something to carry equipment in. The inspector would be more a car, and I did not get quotes and didn't look at the state bid list to get exact prices. But the $100,000, my hope was to get 3 vehicles and to have enough money to do some repairs to the other 2 that we're using to make them safer for a couple of years until we could then get a couple more vehicles. Because if we were to buy 4 vehicles or 5 vehicles now, then 12 years down the road, we're going to be looking at buying 4 or 5 vehicles to replace them. If we could get 2 or 3 of them, and then in a couple of years get a couple more, the stock wouldn't be as much of a burden on the taxpayers, and it would, get us more life out of the 2 newest vehicles we got from the police department. We can probably, with some repairs and tender loving care, get them to last a couple of years. So I didn't want to take the whole apple. I just wanted to work towards having better vehicles for the department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Carbone.
Your employee contracts, can they still use the stipend travel paid, the $55, and then use a city car part-time? Or
It's identified in the inspector's contract who's entitled to a vehicle and who drives their own vehicle. It's spelled out in the contract.
Well, I mean, I guess I would need to look at the contract, but does the contract afford you to use your car with the stipend money most of the time, and then use a city car?
No, it's spelled out.
The rest of the time.
The building inspectors have city vehicles. The health inspectors have reimbursement for mileage. It's
I mean, I gotta say,
spelled out.
$55, you know, that fills up your tank. That, it's kind of ridiculous that we think that's such a low amount of money. It's not like your employees are towing anything, you know, and it's all city driving. That's just something to think about. Thank you.
If I may comment really quickly, the proposed 32,000, or I think it was 32,500 cut from repair and care, FY13
That was on
brings
the,
us down to $50,000. FY13, we had usage at the new city hall of $21,500 for half a year. So now we're looking at a $42,000 bill for the entire year for repair and care. That only leaves $7,000 for repair and care of Old City Hall. Also, the $12,000 miscellaneous cut, I think there's a $2,000 cut there. That $12,000 supports repair and care and miscellaneous expenses for B.F. Brown, the steam plant, 2 old fire stations. And $12,000 wasn't even enough to begin with, and now to bring it down to $10,000 is, we might as well just quit now.
The overtime.
$1,000 higher classification. We don't have a whole huge objection to that cut, but it is a union contract stipend. An individual in the building department who works as in a higher classification by union contract is entitled to that figure. And that's all the comments I have regarding the cuts.
The overtime, we're currently at, with $12,000 in the budget, which we had this year. Through May 15th, we had $794 left, with slips for callbacks for the electrical inspector and the plumbing inspector. I'm not sure that we have any of that 794 still there. We've got a month to go. Now, if I cut the 13 back to 12,000, at some point during the year, I would anticipate I'll be back to see you folks looking for transfers, so that if there's a fire or a leak or some other problem in a building that we get called in, we have money to come back.
okay. Have we covered page 44? Pretty much the Councilor Di Natale has made his comments on page 44. Is there any other comments on page 44? 45? No, we're not going to 45 yet. Okay. Any further comments, Councilor T-Bone? Yeah.
I actually had a question on 44. In the line item for contract services, the requested amount was $52,000, and then the mayor's budget is $14,000. How is that affecting that line item?
That line item was hoping to have enough money to fix one more intersection. During the year, I came in and you gave us another $100,000 to fix some traffic signals. We currently are preparing bid documents to get 2 or 3 intersections fixed with that $100,000. As we told you at the time we were looking for the money, you have a lot of intersections with aged infrastructure. There was a I think, consensus in the room that we need to be spending some more money fixing some of these traffic signals before they fail. We were hoping that we could get another one or two with that $52,000.
And then the additional, the 14,000 that is in the mayor's budget, what is that? What is that?
That covers the contract services when we have, like, last year, we had Putnam and Kimball, the traffic signals fail, and then we had Electric and South, the wires in the underground fail. This is enough money to bring a contractor in basically for 3 failures during the year. It's about what it will cover. If we're fortunate and we have less than that, then what we have them do is come in and do a preventive upgrading of the wiring or something. The wiring in a lot of the signals is about 30 years old, which is well beyond its anticipated life cycle. So,
Thank you.
Can you just explain to me, for my own clarification, one more time, why repair and care has gone from $22,000 to $83,000?
We're estimating, half the year, it cost us $21,500 to run our new city hall for repair and care. We're estimating that it's going to cost $42,500 for the full year. If $32,500 gets cut, that only leaves about $7,000 or $8,000 to maintain old city hall. Old City Hall has many expenses still involved with it.
So you don't think the majority of the repair and care that you spent on the new facility will go away because it is a new facility?
Well, it's a projection at the moment. All we have is half a year to work with.
Okay. Councilor Demonte.
On that line item to make it 13,500. That'll put 70 there, if it were to be approved.
Councilor Bean.
Getting back to the traffic signal lights, in the city, have most of ours been converted to, is it LED lights at the traffic?
the bulbs have been converted.
All the bulbs?
The rest of the stuff is,
Okay, so the bulbs have all been converted, just the...
a lot of the detection, which is in the pavement,
Yeah.
is gone. So they're just strictly on timers. The city recently put cameras in the upper common to fix the detection issues there. We're going to be going out to bid shortly to fix Airport and Bemis, and I forget what the other one is that we're looking at fixing. And we're hoping that we may squeak in fixing part of the third one.
Now, the cameras, are they part of the detection, or are they just part of a...
They're part of the detection, because the loops in the road are gone because of the pavement conditions and the upgrade. It's old technology, and it's being torn up by all of the road work and other factors. The cameras are comparable to doing, redoing the...
Similar to the red light cameras in technology in a way, or?
No. These just detect traffic, stop
From
in one direction or the other, and it cycles the lights through based on what it's seeing for traffic.
Thank you.
But all the control boxes, lots of them are very old. And as we were here recently for appropriation to pay a couple of bills, each control box is $25,000 to replace. We've been fortunate or unfortunate that people have hit a couple and they've paid to fix them, but...
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Question to the Board of Health. We done with this?
In regards to the budget, or just a general?
No, on the budget. On the rubbish contract?
That's another day. That's another day.
Oh, it's another day? Oh, good.
Yeah, rubbish collection is on the 4th of June.
Well, it's the next page over, 3-page difference.
Yeah,
Is that all right? Or do you want me to
Sure.
sit there?
that's fine. Page 9, city clerk. The projected amount for the current year is $246,835. The mayor's budget is $235,151, and the amount requested is $235,151. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 8, which is the city council. The mayor's FY14 budget, $120,375. Projected for the current year is $120,375, and the requested is $120,375. Councilor Di Natale.
I'd like to make a recommendation, we cut $1,500 from education and travel.
It's your own recommendation. It's our budget. If you don't want to go to the conferences or anything, I'll argue to keep that in as a council. I'm sure there's some of us that like to go to the council in the MMA conference, but I don't go personally, so. Next is page 11, the License Commission. The mayor's budget, $8,950, projected for the current year, $8,950, and requested was $8,950. Anything on the License Commission? Page 10, elections. Mayor's budget, $70,634. Current year projection, $44,884. Requested, $70,634. Councilor Di Natale.
I have a question for the clerk. What is the massive increase in voting equipment and maintenance for?
There was talk several months ago that the mayor may be proposing some ballot questions in the fall, and where we are now required to have our ballots in English and Spanish, that would result in probably one double-page ballot plus an additional third page, similar to what we had at the presidential election in November, which doubles the cost of ballot production.
What is the likelihood of that happening?
I go by what I absorb through conversation. I want to prepare to make sure we're ready. If we don't have enough money to produce the ballots, then we have a problem.
Make a recommendation, we cut that by $10,000.
Councilor Tran.
Now, I just want to piggyback on what City Clerk just said. Do you know the deadline for the ballot to be submitted? The initiative questions? Ballot questions?
It's coming up very soon.
Sure.
I can answer that. I don't plan on submitting any ballot questions, but I want to give the opportunity if an issue arose.
Okay, so I'm assuming that the deadline will be before the final discussion for the budget sessions. At that time, we can actually make it further cuts to that line item
You could.
if the deadline passes.
You could.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hay.
Just the mayor is indicating that she put it in understandably in case there were ballot questions that arose. If ballot questions don't arise and you're not going to put any in, what would be the cut that we could make to this that would be appropriate?
I'd need to recalculate that. I have all the prices for all the ballots.
Could you do that for us, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I
Before
can.
we get to our deliberation at the end of the budget hearing process?
I certainly can, and I was not aware of that change. Otherwise, I would have
Thank you very
proposed
much.
that. Thank you.
Yes or no? Any further discussion? That concludes our Councilor Carboni, did you have an announcement that you would like to make?
Yeah, if anyone's still watching at this point, but, this weekend, June 2nd, the Fitchburg Airport is having free open house. It's like a family day. There's gonna be food and tours and displays and stuff. It'll be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.